We're back
We're back
on a Monday
on a Monday again.
to begin our new series, which will be on the 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson,
Correct.
by Dr. Jordan Peterson.
And it's been very exciting. We just want to say in the last 28 days, our growth has been tremendous. And we're excited, we're grateful, very grateful. We've we're getting tons of comments on how to improve everything. And so it just we're doubling down on our commitment to bring value to everybody and hopefully continue this growth, which is unprecedented for us. I mean, the last 28 days, I had to look twice to
Yeah,
figure it out. So
it's
thank you so much.
and it's
Thank you.
been a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of
It's
fun.
been a lot of fun, and this series is on the 12 Rules for Life is going to be, I think, it's going to force us to change in a positive way. Um, just as the series on the 48 laws of power did,
Yeah.
you know. And there were things that we didn't agree on with the laws, and there are things even with rule number 1 that I think maybe I agree with some of it, maybe I don't, but definitely there's a wealth of knowledge in this book and in Dr. Jordan Peterson. And so why don't we start with rule number 1?
He's a clinical psychologist that has a lot of notoriety in our time,
Correct.
and he's considered one of the great minds of our time.
Yeah.
So I do have a great deal of respect for him. Now, you said we didn't agree a lot with the 48 laws.
There
We
were
had some
things, yeah.
disagreements, right?
Yeah.
Even though we think that Robert Greene is exceptional. And we also didn't agree with each other on
Correct.
some things. And that's the beauty of the podcast because I'm 65, he's in his early 30s. He's seeing life from a total different perspective
Yeah.
than I am. And
Let's get into it.
let's get into it.
So, rule number 1, stand up straight with your shoulders back. That's rule number 1 of the 12 rules for life. And it's such a what seems to be a simple rule, but then it seems very complicated and very involved when you really get into it. And so every time I come across a rule, I think, where have I seen this in my life? And one of the things that you taught us in business, because we grew up in the family business, was when you walk into a place, you walk in like you own the place.
Right.
Whether you are there to network with other business people or you need to get something done, you're walking into a bank, you're walking into any institution, you walk in there like you own the place. You
Right.
taught us that growing up. And that's part of, I think, what Jordan Peterson is saying here is that, the perception of you is extremely important. And so I saw you doing it when we would go to networking places, and a lot of people were very timid. I was very timid, teenage, late teens, early 20s in a room full of adults, but you were there to get business and network, and you had no problem and have no problem approaching anybody. And so the only way to approach is with confidence.
Correct.
And that's what I saw and began to learn and imitate and in my own way. But that's, I think, one of the things that um, for me I saw, and I took it as a positive influence, you know, because you walked in there with your, what is it, with your, you stood up straight.
For sure.
And when he says with your shoulders back, it's a little bit funky because it's making you puff your chest out a
Right,
little
right.
bit to a certain extent, it
And it's
seems.
the way we should sit too. I mean, you got me going like this right now. So,
Well,
I
I'm
just sat
hunchy,
up.
I hunch all the time,
Yeah.
which I need to work on that.
Well, there's two things that I can say.
Yeah.
Um, yes, I always told all of you when you walk into a place, it walk in like if you own it, because first impressions are very important. But let me say this: there's a fine line between being arrogant and being self-assured and showing confidence.
Yeah.
You want to come into the place showing that you're confident, that you're self-assured, but you don't want to step over that line where you're showing yourself to be arrogant.
Hmm.
That's not the way I try to carry myself. Now, we cannot um, control how other people perceive us.
Correct.
Okay, so we do the best we can.
Yeah.
But when I walked into a room, I wanted to show that I was confident, reliable, self assured, okay,
Hmm.
but not arrogant.
And it portrays success to a
Correct.
certain extent.
And that's what I meant by you guys were very young, so I kept it simple. When you walk into a place, walk in like if you owned the place,
Yeah, with your head up high.
head up high. Now we can, you know, for those of us that have been in business for some time, and even those that have not, you know, showing yourself to be arrogant, it's not going to fall well with a lot of people. And if you're there to pick up business,
Yes, that's not a way to do it.
no,
You don't connect with people when you're
no, I
arrogant.
was always very courteous.
Yeah.
I would
Respectful.
look at everybody in their eyes. You know, I was keen to a lot of things like a firm handshake. You don't want to go, you know, like this.
Yeah.
And I remember sometimes I was nervous. My hands were a little sweaty. I would dry my hands on a handkerchief that I had in my pocket,
Hmm.
you know. And I learned that from a guy that had a some kind of, eh, you know, I guess an illness. You, you can call it an illness or something. He was just he would sweat profusely. He went to the doctor and he says, "Oh yeah, you've got this." I forget the terminology. I mean, it wasn't serious, but he would sweat. His hands and feet would sweat. You don't see the feet, but in business you definitely see the hands and you shake.
Clammy.
Clammy. And so he would have several handkerchiefs, you know? And I learned that from that guy. Anyway,
I think that that's a great point. The difference between confidence and arrogance.
yeah,
And if one isn't careful, you can come across,
correct.
and perception is reality. And that's what Robert Greene's getting into here, is that even if you're depressed, anxious, in a bad situation, I really like that he says the first one of the first steps of getting out of that is you stand up straight with your shoulders
You
back.
said Robert Greene.
Did I say Robert Greene?
You sure
Oh
did.
shoot. Jordan Peterson.
We're in a new. We
Jordan
gotta
Peterson.
forget about the 40. The 48 laws have been inscribed in
Oh,
our
we over
DNA.
almost a year and a half we lived every
Yeah, you
single
said
day
Robert Greene. We're with Jordan Peterson now.
with Jordan Peterson. That's one of the first steps as a clinical psychologist that he says that this person in this situation needs to do. And I find it interesting because what he says is that the physical, and I wrote it down, I thought it was very interesting, but the physical uh, also affects the mental.
For sure.
And so, and he gets into the example of when, if you frown and do a sad face, you're going to begin to feel sad.
Correct.
And the same thing goes. This is a way to get out of that slump, is to stand up straight with your shoulders back,
Correct.
and you begin to feel more confident.
That's right. And you know, where do I see it? The first thing that came to mind is my grandkids. I'm telling them all the time, hey, stand up straight.
Oh, yeah?
Hey, stand up straight all the time.
Are they hunching?
They're hunching or they're looking down or they're not focusing or whatever, you know, they're kids, right? So I tell them, hey, stand up straight, especially when I take them with me and I open the doors to the vehicle and we're in a parking lot. You know, there's cars coming and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I tell them, hey, stand up straight. Look around you.
Be alert.
Yeah, be alert. What are
Yeah.
you doing? You know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other day, they're little, right? So one of them closed the door and he, he hadn't come out of the vehicle fully. And so one of it was cold and his jacket got caught on the door. And he says, hey, I'm caught on the door. And I said, all right, goodbye. And I walked away a few steps and he goes, hey, hey, come back here for me,
Yeah.
And I kind of try to teach him a little lesson. Pay attention.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. What if your finger gets in? So anyway, you can start this with Jordan Peterson at a very early age. You don't
Oh
have
yeah.
to wait till you're, in your 15s
Yeah.
or in your teens, or you can start now with the young generation, 7, 5 year olds,
Yeah.
hey, stand up straight.
Along with that comes looking people in the eye. And there's a lot of subtle cues in body language that Robert Green, Jordan Peterson,
Jordan Peterson, brother.
that Jordan Peterson uh, is is mentioning that are really important, and we notice them, and maybe even subconsciously. But like a bully, Jordan Peterson uses the example of a bully that they can pick out the guy or the girl that is has low confidence, low
Yes,
self-esteem
yes,
by the way that they carry themselves.
yes.
Maybe they're looking down when they walk past you. They don't, maybe they don't, the handshake, when you give somebody a handshake, maybe, like you said, is it a firm handshake? Or, if you're in a business meeting or a networking meeting, or is it a very kind of light handshake that
Yeah,
doesn't instill much confidence? It doesn't mean that you're not somebody who has a lot of self-confidence,
right.
but you're not portraying that in your handshake or
And
the eye contact.
I'll tell you one thing I will never forget. You don't want to crush the person you're shaking hands with either.
Yeah.
I had that done to me one
Yeah,
time
me too.
by
I
a
think
young
by
lady that was a barista. And I remember seeing her. She had switched careers, and I said, "What are you doing now?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm in charge of all this." And so I said, "That's great, congratulations!" And I shook hands with her, and she just about destroyed.
yeah.
She
She hurt you.
she hurt me
Yeah, it
actually,
was actually too much.
and I go, "Oh." I
Yeah.
didn't say, but she actually left me hurting.
It was that, maybe it's that difference, like you say, between confidence and arrogance. She went too far on the
Oh my
handshake.
God. I shook hands with this young lady, and she actually
Yeah.
she embedded my ring into the other fingers.
Yeah.
Anyway,
There
so
was
you don't want to do that
no, that actually
either.
makes you question also the firmness of that handshake. Why are you shaking somebody's hand so hard?
So hard.
Yeah, because I remember shaking her hand too. We're at a networking event,
You know who I'm
and
talking about then.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh, I'll tell you, we're still talking about her today,
Oh yeah.
over 10 years later.
Over 10 years later.
So she made an impression,
No doubt about it. Oh,
but it wasn't a positive one.
well, I was hurting. After that handshake, I was hurting.
Yeah, for me, it was. Now looking back at it, I'm thinking something's off there. Why are you gonna shake a hand so hard? Do you not realize your own strength,
Maybe.
or do you have something against men? Do you have something against? Are you maybe?
I think you're getting too deep, man. I think
Well, if you can't
no, I
notice,
never thought she had anything against men, but um when you
well,
think back, I
I,
don't know.
I think there's something to it.
Yeah, I think there's something off.
Because if
I
you
agree.
can't if you can't notice that people are reacting a certain way after the way you shake your
Oh,
hand,
she killed it.
it could have also been nervousness.
Yeah, she
Maybe she
killed me.
was
It
nervous.
was yeah, I mean
Yeah, it
she
could have
left
been
me hurting.
I'm nervous and let me just, and so who knows what the reason were.
Who knows what the issue is?
But
We're not clinical psychologists.
no, and that's one thing that
But
this rule gets very deep into, like, the actual psychology of the brain, which is very interesting.
yes, and it's interesting because you said something right now that you know, um I'm trying to remember. See, in the beginning of this book, Jordan Peterson is talking a lot about the lobsters.
Yeah.
And to be frank, you know, I think he went very deep into it. And I read it because we're doing this podcast and I want to research everything, but it got a little tedious for me. But it was quite interesting when I was done with it, as I was reflecting. He's talking about the serotonin level being high in the confident lobster.
Hmm.
Oh, I got what you said. You talked about bullies.
Yeah.
He talks about bullies with the lobsters. Now, for our viewers, he says that 350 million years of divergence from the lobsters to us, and he's saying that is the same neural circuit. Okay? This is what I picked up on it. Okay? That's why he's comparing us to lobsters. But he's saying, look, if you stand up straight with your chest forward and so forth, you have probably a better chance at winning a battle. And if you win a battle, you get that dopamine,
Serotonin.
that serotonin flush, right?
Hmm.
You are more likely to win the next battles.
Hmm.
And he says that is exactly what's happening to the lobsters. The lobsters, they win a fight against the other lobster for a piece of property. They need to live somewhere and hide, right? While they're being vulnerable. So they get that serotonin level, okay? And then they're more likely to win the next fight,
Yeah, they become the dominant male
the dominant male. Now he equates that to humans
society.
by saying, if you're crouched over and you seem to be timid and this and that, most likely your serotonin levels are low.
Right.
You're going to be a target for bullies. You're going to attract that to yourself. Whereas if you're self confident and you show it to the world that you're self confident, you're going to be less likely to be bullied. It was very interesting. That's what I got. You got something different apparently from your
No,
eyes.
no, no. Well, no, I thought it was interesting about the lobsters. Um, I think in a lot of interviews I've seen Jordan Peterson in, and he's been attacked quite a bit. This book is just as the 48 Laws is very controversial. The 12 Rules for Life is extremely controversial for many reasons. But one of the things I've seen in interviews is they attack him for the lobster thing.
For sure.
And I think he's using the way that I took it is he's using that as an example that nature does this. And
Yes.
and we to a certain extent are no different. The A small percentage of people have the majority of the wealth. A small percentage of uh, composers have composed the majority of the classical music that we listen to. A small percentage of cities contain the most population density. It's so he's what he's saying is that this is something in nature. It's part of nature and the selection of nature. And I think he gets attacked a lot for the whole lobsters. Like we're not like lobsters, this and that. But well, to a certain extent, he's trying to prove, hey, well, we are.
Well, he's talking about hierarchy,
Correct.
okay?
Dominance.
Right. And he's saying, look,
Apes,
a lot of time, what a lot of people
birds.
say is that hierarchy, okay, is based on power. And he says, no, it is not. Hierarchy is based on competence. And you'll find hierarchy everywhere in nature. So it's not something that is a social construct.
Correct. Yeah, he was saying it doesn't have to do with capitalism, communism. It doesn't have to do with these things. It has to do with the fact that
Competence.
you have some people that are more dominant males, dominant females, and those are the ones that control the resources. That's what he's arguing.
Correct.
And I,
So he makes it very clear. He says, look, hierarchy is everywhere in nature.
mm-hmm,
Go out and take a look at it. You have it everywhere. In the wolves, in the lions, in the hyenas,
apes,
apes, okay? And if you let them sort themselves out without any outside influence, the hierarchy will prevail because this is hundreds of thousands of years of evolution.
the pecking order of chickens.
Right. Okay. Because a lot of people say, well, no, the hierarchy is based on power. And he says, no, it's based on competence. But then he goes on to say, look, our hierarchy is flawed, okay? It's tempted by corruption. We're not perfect. So you see in the hierarchy, okay, certain degrees of corruption because we're not perfect,
that are not based on competence, let's
that
say.
are not based on competence,
Yeah.
okay? But he's saying it's not power. That's not what creates it. And then he says, and by the way, power, what do you define power as? So he's a clinical psychologist. He gets into philosophy a lot. It's a lot of deep thinking.
Yeah.
And we're going to try always, because we're also in business, we're in real estate, we're in the insurance business. We're also going to try to, what
Well,
is
how
it?
is it relatable?
How is it relatable to our business world
Yeah.
so that everybody, gets an idea for it? But he says, how do you define power? He's got a lot of good. So he says, do you define power by tyranny or brutality or threat? That's not how I define power.
Mm.
Power should not be defined by tyranny, brutality, or threat. Why should power be brutal and tyrannical?
Mm.
Can't power be also good? And what comes to mind is Bukele. Bukele in El Salvador. In a short period of time, he's turned El Salvador literally from, I think he himself said it was the most dangerous country to live in the world, to now the safest country to live in the world. And you've got a ton of revenue, dollars, money coming into that country to do development and so forth. You can walk at night at 3 in the morning. At
I don't know. I mean,
You
yeah.
can,
What
because
I
I've
do
seen it.
know is that people that we know are buying property in El Salvador. People that we know are saying these things positive about
Well,
El
I'm
Salvador.
looking at it. I'm seeing it.
I
I'm
know, but we
researching it.
haven't been there.
No,
But
well,
the boots on the ground, the people that have been
right.
there, and then because you got to be careful with news, and
That's true.
when if you're listening to one thing that says it's the safest place on earth, I, I think I want to talk to the people that are living there, and I know people that have said, "Hey, we hadn't gone in 10 years, we hadn't gone in 15 years, now we're going back."
And it's in it
Right.
day
That's
and night.
to me. That's okay.
Well,
I'll
we have
listen to
those
that.
people too.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, that's an interesting example about somebody who was willing to a certain extent, you're putting yourself out there, you're putting your life on the line, a guy like Bukele.
Of course.
And but it takes people like this to make change. And in this case, it seems to be positive.
Yeah, it seems to be
It
positive.
seems to be positive. So, yeah, I think it confidence. If you struggle with confidence, and I think a lot of that comes from our upbringing, um, it can lead to a lot of problems in later on in life. And I think with rule number one is talking about, let's say, if you're not in the best, have the highest confidence, put yourself in a position where you can begin to build up confidence. I'll speak personally.
Okay.
What allowed me to build confidence in business was many successes.
Mini successes.
Yeah, many
Okay.
successes. So for me, when I was fortunate that I grew up in a family business, so I was exposed to business already. But then when I started going off, branching off more on my own and doing sales, um, to a certain extent, you want to know your product and you want to understand it and everything. And knowledge is very important there when they ask you questions, handling the objection and all that. But then the other angle is you have to ask right for the sale. Once I started asking people for the sale, and I was selling life insurance at the time, then I started closing more deals, and that built my confidence. And so I felt you can put me in front of anybody and I'll be able to close that deal. but that came from many, many, many transactions that I had already closed, many, many, many that I had not closed, and I learned from those. And so I think that if you're in a situation where you need to build up confidence and self-esteem in your trade or whatever it is you're doing, try to find many successes and build up along the way.
That's excellent. That's
So
excellent. You know, it's interesting. We're in sales,
yeah,
so you definitely have to know your product. I'm not saying that you have to know it, you know, I mean, because you can take some of these products that, whether it be in real estate or insurance, and if you really want to know some of these products completely, you could spend literally months
yeah,
on one. And I don't know anybody that has the time to do that, but you have to know your product fairly well. Okay. And that was the thing that gave me confidence. Now, it's very good. That's why I tell everybody, look, if you're thinking of opening a business, pull the trigger and do it, because there's nothing like the experience being there.
yeah,
And you're going to get humbled because, for example, I remember in when I a long time now we're in real estate big time, and I don't sell life insurance anymore, but I remember selling a life insurance policy to an engineer. The gentleman was an engineer. Engineers are trained to look at the details, find out exactly what works, what doesn't through formulas. What is the strength of this steel? What is the bending arc pressure equating to numbers and so forth. I remember sitting down with this particular person. He was an engineer, and it was an amazing moment because he knew the policy better than I did. He had actually studied the policy and looked at the numbers even better than me.
wow,
So he cleaned the floor with me. He totally destroyed me. Now, I was bringing value because I knew that what I had prepared was something that was needed by the family. But it was an amazing, humbling experience.
mm,
Okay. And since then, this is a long time ago, I always thought, engineers and architects, you better be prepared. You better know your product. You better know things in detail.
yeah,
Okay. And then that idea was absolutely crushed when I went to sell a life policy to a gentleman that was in the gardening business. He was a gardener by trade, but he had an engineering mindset. He was also extremely intricate and detailed. So the moral of the story is walk in there, like they say, you know, stand up straight with your shoulders back,
mm-hmm.
show confidence, but you better have something to back it up. You better know your products.
Eh,
You better know what you're talking about.
yeah,
And you better bring value to the people that you're meeting with, or you're going to get destroyed in the process.
yeah. It can't be all looks,
No.
but that's the beginning, and so we've all heard the saying, "Fake it till you make it."
Mm.
To a certain extent, you're gonna fake it until you make it. You're gonna fake it until you begin to feel more confident in what you're doing, and then, I mean, to a certain extent, right? I
Right.
mean, you gotta, like you
But
said, you gotta know your trade and what you're doing.
you got to know what you're doing, because to get to the top level, you're not going to get there by faking it. You
No,
might you might fake it till you make it in the beginning a little bit, but then you're going to come across people that know their stuff.
yeah,
And they're in different stages of their life, and they come from all walks of life. They're not going to mess with you.
no,
They're not going to have any mercy. They're going to tell you, hey, you know what? You don't know what you're talking about.
right. You have to back it up with
You
something.
got to back it up with knowledge.
But so much when he talks about like the dominant
Lobster.
lobster, or even the dominant person,
Uh-huh.
dominant male. The dominant lobster, he says it's a part in rule one is that he gets all the girls,
Right.
right? And to a certain extent, um, you know, same with like the chimps and certain things like that. But what he says is it's not only being dominant, it's also knowing how, like, having fruitful relationships. Because he says no matter how dominant physically you are, two of the other person can take out two of the other less dominant than you, less physically strong than you, can take one dominant person out.
Right.
So you have to, it's also about relationships and community. And that's also part of it. Because, this idea of ruling with fear, like Machiavelli, eventually somebody, when they have an opportunity, they're going to have a couple forces and take you out if they can. So you're constantly in a state of putting out all these people that potentially can take you out. But I thought that was very interesting. It's not only about being somebody who's like dominant, and whether it's in the boardroom or in interactions, you have to be confident, but you also, we're social creatures and you have to build alliances, and you can't just be running people over either. And I think that that's important.
Oh
Even
yeah.
like in sales organizations where you see like the number one guy, the number two guy, the number, you know, I don't know. From what I've seen, usually the top people up there, they're really good at connecting with others.
I think so. They have nothing to fear. They're self-confident.
They're self-confident.
You know,
Yeah.
they know their product well. They have contacts that they've developed. You know, they're
Yeah.
in a comfortable situation in their lives, and as long as you don't get arrogant and cocky, and you keep the mindset that you have to learn something new every day and stay in the game. As long as you are, if you retire and you take off and live somewhere in an island, that's different. But as long as you're staying in the game,
Hmm.
you must remain active. You got to be aware of the changes. You got to learn something about your business every single day
Yeah.
and adapt with the wave that comes along. There is absolutely no business that was running 10 years ago that is running the same today. I used to say 20. Forget 20.
With
5 years ago,
technology.
things that look what happened with the pandemic.
Yeah. Everything
Okay?
changed.
Everything changed. So there's no business that has been running that is open today and successful and was created years ago
Hmm.
that has not gone through a tremendous amount of adaptation.
Yeah.
Okay?
Um, I'm, I've also, I'm also thinking of somebody that we know in real estate that took it to the point of arrogance. And the people that I've talked to about this person, and recently we talked to somebody that mentioned them, uh, they were like, just an arrogant person,
Hmm.
just somebody that they took it to the point of like, a peacock shows off, right? The male peacock is the beautiful one. Uh, this one, in real estate, it's about cars and suits and trying to show off. But this person took it too far, and so their reputation is just, they're arrogant. Now, if you've lasted so long in business, beyond 3 decades, you probably, there's something behind that. I'm sure there is, but you don't want to come across as that person, as an
Well,
arrogant person.
it depends what your values in life are.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that, like in this rule number one, that's the intention here, to come
No,
across as an arrogant person.
no, he's takes it down to his basic forms. He's talking about hierarchy, and hierarchy in the wild, um, your life depends on it.
Yes. And
You're
in
gonna
in
get attacked by a tiger or a wolf or something. If you have no choice but to be on all your senses, okay?
Yeah.
Because hierarchy exists because it relies on competence and not power. And I think that's one of his main things in this rule. Uh, You know, it's because a lot of people, he's gotten a lot of slack because people come to him and say, hey, you know what, hierarchy is
A
it's a
social
product,
construct.
it's a product of power and social contract construct, and he says no, it is not.
Right.
You
It's
know,
nature.
it's a natural thing. It's been developed over hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And he's saying, I'm not saying that the hierarchy that we see in our humanity today is not tainted, you know, with some corruption, some level of corruption,
Yeah.
or a lot of level of corruption.
There were a
I think you
couple.
can look at our Congress and see that some of the stuff that's going on in
Mhm.
our politics, are not
Right.
kosher. They're not, they're just not.
So
And
taking
so,
it to the personal, because I think the reason that somebody's gonna read the 12 rules for life is probably because they want to better themselves, personally.
yes,
Uh,
personal growth.
I thought it was very interesting that he talks about the importance of breakfast. The importance of
Yeah.
waking up at a certain time uh, each morning. And then one thing that I learned, was something called the a positive feedback loop.
Okay.
And so he brings up as an example the person that drinks a lot of alcohol, uh, and he talks about all the things that are going on in the brain. I won't get into that, but I thought it was interesting how he says, you have a night of drinking, you wake up with a hangover the next day, and then this person realizes that the cure for the hangover is more alcohol, and that is what's called a positive feedback loop. Now, they don't all have to be like in a negative, destructive way. This one is destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but he says that once that's done, he says when the medication, quote unquote, this quote, when the medication causes the disease, a positive feedback loop has been established. When the medication causes the disease, so the medication in this case is more alcohol, a Bloody Mary in the morning, uh, michelada, a mimosa, whatever, to cure the hangover. That's a positive feedback loop, and it's destructive, according to Jordan Peterson. I also like, this is a quote: "If you can bite, you generally don't have to." The
I like
importance,
that.
and it took me to martial arts,
Mm-hmm.
and you put us in karate when we were young and everything, and then when I was about maybe 17, 18, 19, around there, I started taking personal one-on-one martial arts with our good friend Sensei Bill, and and there's so much, I think, confidence building when you do martial arts, not only because you can achieve a physical feat, like one of them was jump roping 3 minutes straight, and I remember him telling me he could go like 15 minutes straight, and I was like,
Wow.
wow, how do you do that? And there would be a puddle of, he says, a puddle of sweat around him. But you're training your body to a certain point where if you had to inflict damage for self-defense, you can, but you won't. And that's what I think Jordan Peterson is saying. If you can bite, you generally don't have to, because you won't allow it to escalate to that point. If a bully is doing something, you say no earlier on, because you know that you can say no. And I think that martial arts is a great way to build confidence,
I agree.
along with standing up straight with your shoulders back, take martial arts.
That's perfect.
Um, so yeah, I thought that was pretty powerful. And then yeah, um, there's a lot that
There's
we
a
can
lot
get
going on in
into,
this.
but I think a routine is
It's a long
something.
one.
There's a long one. I think what I walk away with rule number one is establishing more structure to a routine of my day.
Okay.
You know, a set time to wake up in the morning. Uh, the breakfast, he says, have a high fat, high protein breakfast. The problem, and have it as soon as you wake up as possible. Brush your teeth and have your breakfast. Um, stay away from high, like, carb, like high. He didn't say carb, but things that I guess spike your insulin level.
Okay.
Um, and then the positive feedback loop to me was very interesting because I like coffee, and if you don't get coffee, if I don't have coffee, I can get a headache. And so the I fall under this category, and so it's making me reassess here, this positive feedback loop. When the medication, more coffee, causes the disease, the addiction to coffee, a positive feedback loop has been established. Because to cure the headache, you need more coffee.
Mm. Well, I don't get headaches, but sorry, Jordan, but I'm not giving up my coffee.
Well, he's not saying to give up coffee, but
There's no way. No, no, I know, but you know, I look forward to it.
yeah,
Maybe I'm terribly addicted to it. And I probably am now. I used to drink,
caffeine is,
we've grown up differently. Okay.
yeah,
I was growing up in Cuba, and my parents would give me a little sip, so and that was strong coffee.
yeah,
And in Cuba, they would give me my little, everybody was drinking coffee. I wanted to drink it too. I was a little kid. They didn't see anything wrong with it.
yeah.
I'm 5-year fully caffeinated kid jumping trees and getting into fights.
Can you imagine?
So
And
we grew up in different eras and in different times. And
yeah,
um, however, the basics of this rule, it's primordial because he's talking about hierarchies and that this is not a social construct. And that is very interesting to me. And I know that, um, keep in mind, we're the messengers, we're discussing the book, um, but he's gotten beat up over that tremendously, tremendously. And I've seen several podcasts on him where he keeps coming back saying, hey, look, this is not a perfect solution. We're not perfect by any means. So it is tainted with some degree of corruption, but
hmm,
you can find it everywhere. And he
right.
gives examples of everywhere.
Um, the quote we can end with, unless you wanted to throw anything
No,
else
no.
in. Uh, Overall, I think it's a positive message with rule, one, and this is a quote from Jordan Peterson. It says, "Change might be opportunity instead of disaster." So the person who has the higher serotonin levels, more confidence, looks at change as it may be an opportunity, potential opportunity, instead of potential disaster. The person who has the low serotonin levels looks at change and fears it, and that could lead to disaster. So I thought that was really cool because I think you and I, we try to make it a point to be extremely positive of the future, and the future doesn't exist without change of ourselves and of our environment and everything going on. And this has to do with being confident, calm, and standing tall. And if you have those traits and can work on those things, then you will embrace change and will look at it as an opportunity. And so I thought that was a pretty cool message to maybe wrap
Oh,
up rule number
it's
one.
absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I love it. I'm glad that you threw that in there because there's a lot of controversy over this rule number one,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, people
And
get stuck on the lobsters. I think there's so much. The lobsters is the beginning of rule one. So I think if you're gonna read the book, you got to get past the lobsters.
get past the
There's
lobster.
a lot of good stuff
There's a lot of
past
good
it,
stuff.
and not everything. You take what you feel is good about it, but I think, like you said at the beginning, we try to bring our personal experiences. This isn't a book review. There are a bunch of channels that do book reviews. That's not what we're doing. We we read the books and we do a series on it, but we try to bring in our personal experiences and our views on it. And with that, anything else you want to throw in?
I love it. Be confident, be calm, and stand tall.
Yeah.
That's a great message to end this on. Absolutely.
All right.
All right, there
Thank
goes
you.
our first rule.
Rule number one.
Thank you.